Hi guys, it is Aoife from Fred We Died Laughing and I am here to do my weekly wrap up. I got 4 books read in total this week and I'm going to tell you all about them now. And the first book I read was The Woman at 72 Derry Lane by Carmel Harrington. It actually feels like it's been like 3 weeks since I finished this book because this week has felt very long. I feel like at the moment with self-isolation, weeks just feel like months. It's a woman called Stella who lives in this road in Dublin called Derry Lane, and Stella doesn't really have the greatest marriage. She is in an abusive relationship with her husband and she feels obviously very trapped and very scared to do anything about it. And there is a woman who lives next door to her called Ria who lives in 72 Derry Lane, and we know from Ria she's kind of the neighbours treat her with a little bit of suspicion. She never seems to come out of the house. She is maybe like a bit of a grumpy lady. They seem to have like all different types of opinions on her. They think that maybe she's a little bit mad, that they don't really know her that well, and even though she's been there for a very long time, people just don't really know her that well. But we quickly learn that Ria is actually a very nice person. She's just someone who is trapped within her own home because she suffers from anxiety and from agoraphobia, and she is constantly having to listen to what is going on in Stella's house, and she is obviously very worried about Stella and she doesn't really know what to do. Stella and Ria end up forming this really lovely friendship between the two of them, and they kind of help each other out with their problems, and Ria becomes like a safe space for Stella to go to when she needs to get away from her husband and when she needs a bit of friendship, and someone who is able to kind of build up her confidence to, you know, think about starting to leave her husband. And we are also getting the story from this girl called Sky in between the chapters of Ria and Stella, and Sky's story is from the past, and we are figuring out kind of slowly as the book progresses what the connection of Sky's story is between Ria and Stella. She has a connection to both of them and we're figuring out what that is. This was just a really lovely book for me. I think I just got really sucked into the story. I really liked the friendship. I really liked the group of characters. There was just a lovely group of characters there who became really supportive of both Stella and Ria, and it was just really, really nice to see. It was just like, even though there were some like really serious topics in this, such as severe anxiety, grief and domestic violence, it was still like actually quite a lovely book and quite heartwarming because of the support system that ended up being built up between the two women and the support they gave each other. I will say I don't suffer from agoraphobia, so I don't know if the representation of this here for Ria is representative of what it's like, but I seem to think it seemed to be okay. I do think there was a bit at the end where it seemed to be like maybe she started to recover a little bit too quickly. I will say Sky's story became really, really interesting to me once I figured out what was going on and what was about to happen in that storyline. It's very obvious once it gets to a certain part and that you figure out exactly what's going on, the year, where they are, everything about that, and I was really, really interested in that. I almost wanted to stay with Sky and I wasn't as interested in going back to Stella and Ria because Sky's story was so tragic and so immersive, and I just wanted to know about Sky and how she was going to like survive what I knew was coming and things like that. So yeah, I found myself kind of not wanting to go back to Stella and Ria, but then when I was with Stella and Ria I did enjoy them, but Sky's definitely kind of overtook my interest in part. But I did really enjoy this, and I think it was just a book that I was just able to completely sink myself into, and that is at this moment in time and what is going on, that is the type of book I really, really needed. So I'm really, really grateful for it. And yeah, so I gave it a really strong like 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really, really enjoyed it, and yeah, it gave me a really nice escape that was just really needed at this time. Next book after that I read was The Harsh Invisible Furies by Boyne. This is a book I've heard a lot about and I've really only heard really good things about it, and now I understand all those good things because I absolutely love this book. This was just one of my favourite books of the year so far. This book is about a young man called Cyril Avery who is Irish, living in Dublin, and he is gay, and he's born in just after World War II, so in the 1940s, and obviously he is, when he's a young man, he's in the 50s and the 60s, and it's really, really hard for him. He was born to a 16-year-old mother who then ends up giving him up for adoption, and his whole life he's known that he was adopted. His adoptive parents are really interesting characters, and he ends up just growing up in this really strange kind of home, but not like a bad home, just like a strange eccentric kind of home. He obviously kind of knows from a young age that there is something different about him, and that when he gets older he realizes that he is gay. And as a gay man growing up in Ireland in the 60s, obviously being gay was illegal and gay people were treated really, really poorly by just the rest of the community, by the church. It was just, they were just treated really, really badly, and told that there was something wrong with them and that they're perverts and all this kind of thing. So yeah, he has to struggle with that, and obviously he struggles to hide himself, who he is. And the parts in this book, every time we go to like a different section in the book, it skips forward 7 years. So we're seeing a really well-rounded view of Cyril's life and all the different people that he has in his life, how he is getting on like kind of in himself, and seeing his character growth from just like the start to the finish in this book was just so wonderful to see. And just he felt like he was just so scared and so confused in himself, like in the early parts of the book, and then in the later parts of the book you just feel that he is so settled in himself, and he knows who he is and he knows who he loves, and it's just so beautiful and it's so nice. And there was just, yeah, this book was just so lovely. It's really, really like sad at times, and especially the start of it, like the first section of it when we're learning about his mother and how she gets to the point where she is pregnant and alone and giving up her child for adoption. That part is really, really sad. Then as you go further into it, it's actually really, really funny. There are some really sad parts in this book. There are parts that like did really make me tear up, but there are also parts that made me laugh out loud. And there are some parts in this book that I don't think I will ever forget. Like there's one part, I don't want to say what like exactly what it is, but there's a part to do with the confession that Cyril gives to a priest, and he goes in for confession. He's kind of like spilling his soul out to this priest, and it is just, it's so funny. It was a really funny moment, and that's probably one of my favourite book moments of all time in a book. It's just, it was so good. Really, really enjoyable. The writing was excellent. The characters were so like alive in this book. They just like stepped out from the page and like shook your hand, and you know, really got to like, you really got to know them. I just felt like they were just so alive, and I just loved that about this book. I will say there are some characters in this book that are so over the top, and some of the things they do are quite unbelievable, so it makes them a little bit unbelievable as characters who would actually exist in this world. But at the same time, you just kind of have to, everything about it is just kind of weird and eccentric. Like there's nothing really like normal in Cyril's life, so you just have to kind of accept that and take those characters and like some of the things they say and some of the things they do with a pinch of salt. Just really enjoyed this book. I just thought it was absolutely excellent. I had such a good reading experience with it, so I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. And this weekend I did have a 24-hour readathon for the Irish Readathon, and the vlog of that will be going up soon. So I decided I wanted to read The Invasion, but I also wanted to reread The Call. So The Call is basically a book set in Ireland, and we are getting an Ireland in the future that has been cut off from the rest of the world. So basically Ireland is kind of on lockdown from the rest of the world, so it was kind of funny reading this at this moment in time. But what has happened is that the She, so almost like the fairy folk people, have come back years and years and years ago. There's this kind of like, I think it's in mythology that Ireland actually, like the Irish people stole Ireland from the fairies, and the fairies are trapped somewhere else now in something called the Grey Lands, and the fairies now have figured out a way to kind of connect the lands again almost, and they want to come back and get their lands back, and they are taking it out on the children, the Irish children between the ages of like 13 and 18. Basically what happens is children end up being called, so there's this thing called the Call, and they are in the Grey Lands, so the fairy lands, for what seems to be a day, but they actually only disappear in our land for only 3 minutes. But while they are in the fairyland, they are being hunted, and if they are caught by the She, by the fairy folk, horrible things happen to them, like really horrible things. Not a lot of people survive. Like most of the children in Ireland at this point are dead or will die. Not many of them will survive. Those who do survive can come back with horrific injuries and like really bad like mental trauma. And now children in Ireland, they go to these survival colleges that basically teaches them how to best survive their call. And we are following a girl called Nessa who is in one of these survival colleges, but everyone knows that when she is called, and there's not an if about it, it's when she is called, she won't survive, because when she was younger she had polio, but because Ireland is now cut off from the rest of the world, things like some modern medicine isn't available to people anymore, because it's just not there and they don't have the facility to make it anymore. So when she was a child she had polio, and she obviously never had like a vaccine or anything against that or proper medication, so she is crippled, and because of her disability she can't run properly, she can't walk properly, and so it means that she will probably, if she does end up going into the Grey Land, she will be caught very easily. And because of this, Nessa's determined that no, she will survive, she will find a way to survive, and we are following her as she basically is in the survival college, and dealing with losing her friends and trying to survive her call. It was a very long-winded explanation for this, I'm sorry, but this is a really good book. It's full of like body horror and gore, so if you don't like real like descriptive body parts and like torture and stuff like that, maybe don't get into this one. But if you're kind of interested in it, this might be fun. The she in this are just absolutely terrifying. We get every time a kid in the survival college is called, we get a chapter from their point of view, and what happens to them in the Grey Lands and if they survive and if they don't. And just some of those ones are just like so, they're just like so creepy to read. But I do think this is just a really fast-paced book. There's loads of action in it, there's loads of different things happening both in the college and outside of the college, and I just really enjoyed this one. I originally gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars, and I do think I would give it a 5 out of 5 stars again, maybe a 4 to a 4.5 if I was to be really pedantic about it. But it was still a really enjoyable book. I was really stuck into it. I read it in a few hours and I really enjoyed my reread of it. Invasion, we are following, it's basically straight after the events from the call, and in this one we are seeing what happens after the call. It's like kind of what we are actually seeing in this one. There's a little bit more world building. We are seeing outside of the colleges, and we are seeing kind of the rest of Ireland and the adults of Ireland and what they are doing, what some of the people who have survived the call when they were younger, what they are doing now, if they're like mentally capable of like getting on with their lives and they're not completely traumatized. And we are seeing kind of what Ireland at the moment is doing with things like with people like criminals and traitors and how they punish them, and just different systems in place now that Ireland has completely changed. And yeah, they're completely at the mercy of the she. Obviously things between the she and the Irish people do come to a head in this one, so that is also, you know, there's a lot of action and fighting and terrible things happening in this one as well. Like really no one is safe. Like none of your like even favourite characters who like survive the call, they might not survive the invasion. So it's real like, you know, you're kind of on the edge of your seat hoping your favourite characters will survive. There's also a character called Aoife in this book, which I appreciate. So I did really enjoy this one. I enjoyed just seeing more of what is going on outside of the survival colleges, and yeah, exactly how everything will kind of wrap up, because it's all kind of like, I don't know, it's all a bit like complicated with things with like treaties from like years past and how exactly the she can come back, and there's a lot of like, I don't know, fine print to do with it maybe. But I did really enjoy this one. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Not completely 5 stars, but a 4 out of 5 stars. I do think it did end a little bit abruptly, but I did really enjoy it, and I think other people who like The Call would probably enjoy it as well. But I do think The Call is probably the better book out of the two, but I still did really enjoy this one as a sequel. So that's everything I have read this week. Please let me know what you guys have read, what you guys are reading this week, and I would love to know. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys again next time. Bye.